Today we're going to be looking at the appeal of Zoe Kravitz by popular demand and what makes her face so attractive. Now, if you've probably seen Batman by now, it's a good movie, I really quite liked it. Her portrayal of Catwoman has gotten a lot of attention recently. Her acting is the primary talking point, and granted she did act well, but also there's a facial aesthetic component to why she was chosen over so many other options, and everyone that watches the film can see that she has a high degree of facial attractiveness, which is why she's a good fit for the physically very demanding role of Catwoman. Let's start with the basics. Zoe has extremely lean facial features that come as a result of low body fat and the loss of fatty tissue deposits around the malar region, which come with age. Since she is only 33 years old, it is likely more so just attributed to body fat loss, but also aging does tend to hollow out the cheeks and the jaw region, which is why her facial definition and angularity is far more than you would expect for a younger 20-year-old baby-faced woman. Here we can see her face was a lot more filled out when she was younger. There is a lack of a prominent OG curve, which is a curvilinear line that we can imagine going down your cheeks, as well as a lack of that gaunt look that she now pulls off so well as Catwoman. Low body fat is a very big deal here to her attractiveness because it takes her from being a pretty girl next door type, which is what we see with younger women with more babyish features, to that striking supermodel appearance, which is really only visible with high levels of facial angularity, and again, that comes with age. She still clearly has a very strong foundation in bones, eyebrow thickness, eye shape, but that well above average dentofacial structure was being masked by a layer of facial fat. She lost that facial fat, which accentuated her already attractive face. You do need a solid foundation of dentofacial development, meaning that your face has to be properly formed, sharp jawlines, defined jawlines, forward facial growth, adequate proportions. Those are features that come about with healthy habits during your adolescence, and your genetic makeup does play a part, but these are the factors that you need to reach high levels of attractiveness and go beyond the average looking face. The common trope of everyone can be a 7 or an 8 does not really play out in reality, and we covered this in our previous video. This leads us to the features themselves, now that we've gotten that out of the way. Her leanness really brought out her OG curve as she got older, and now you can see the sharpness of her cheekbone prominence being much more projected, both in the frontal view and the 3/4 profile. The OG curve, again, is a S-shaped curvilinear line that juts out from the cheekbone region down to the mouth. We will be making a new refresh of some of our older videos on what makes an attractive cheekbone region and mid-face, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, you should still do that and you can catch that video. Sharp and prominent cheekbones are well known to be an attractive feminizing trait because they are oftentimes influenced by estrogen, and they also signal prominent facial growth as well as low levels of body fat, and both are a prerequisite to having an existent OG curve. It is sort of a circular deal where low body fat gets your bones to show out more, and the showing of these bones signals that you are at a relatively low level of body fat. Zoe has some of the most forward-grown zygomatic region, or the cheekbone regions, out there, and we've already touched on her having minimal levels of buccal fat, which is what gives her that hollow cheek look. And again, this buccal fat does tend to reduce as you get older, and your face just generally loses a lot of that baby fat. Arguably, this is one of her strongest facial traits, and it is particularly striking when watching her in motion. In a world where most people are not exceptionally lean, a prominent OG curve and sharp malar region really does stand out. Since they make up a big portion of her face, it adds an antler effect where she really stands out everywhere she goes. Her cheekbones themselves can be described as medium set with a high amount of malar mass, meaning that they're quite large. They are not the characteristically melting low set cheekbones that are barely visible, but they're not the model-esque high set cheekbones that you see in top models like Sydney Harper or Bella Hadid. Sydney's cheekbones pop out a lot closer to her eyes, and they're a lot more compact, not occupying a majority of her mid-face, and so this is usually a telltale sign of high cheekbones, since it would look odd to have this type of malar mass that Zoe has this high up on her face. Zoe's cheekbones protrude about midway through the nasal region instead of that bone mass being compacted closer to the eyes. Additionally, her overall shorter facial height just leads to less of an elongated S-shaped OG curve. For cheekbones to appear really high set, usually that curve has to have enough space to properly show itself in the 3/4 view. This ricochets us into our next point, and apologies for the information overload, but a lot of these things tie into one another. Zoe's face shape and overall facial height are quite feminized. When seen next to other actresses or actors, her overall head shape and size are notably smaller. This is obviously because she is quite short, but it also plays into her perceived attractiveness, femininity, and facial proportions. The first we'll get out of the way is her total facial length to width ratio. This just takes the overall vertical height of your face from hairline to chin and divides it by the widest part of the face, and usually you want that to be somewhere in the 1.3 to 1.4 range to not appear unproportionately long-faced or short-faced, kind of like the horse face look. But Zoe sits right at the upper end near 1.4, so it's a good explanation of why her facial features look feminized, because her face shape is also quite feminized. So while her face shape itself is actually quite harmonious, her absolute facial height is really, again, feminized and neotenous. Her facial thirds do work to this advantage, and she plays around with a lot of different looks that feminize or mature her look because she has the right features for it. With an overwhelmingly large upper third, her baseline look is much more mature and classy, and this is really apparent when she ties her hair up into a tight bun. That look is also the one that maximizes her total facial length to width, near that 1.4 marker that we're trying to get in terms of proportions. So I guess it does show that a lot of women can control how much of their face is exposed by choosing to reveal or hide more of it with hair, and this is what leads to different facial archetypes, I guess. Now, when she does wear a more playful or youthful hairstyle like bangs, it really does alter her look, and again it goes back to that point. Some individuals with flawless facial proportions can pull off any look without a notable change, but Zoe's hairstyle drastically changes her apparent facial proportions and thus her appearance too. Bangs really do help balance out her facial thirds while also shortening her total facial length, and now her face looks much more cutesy and youthful. In a study done by Mogielski and Welling, the effect of jawbone prominence, cheekbone prominence, eyebrow thickness, eye size, and facial length on evaluations of facial masculinity and attractiveness were assessed. But surprisingly, the researchers found that it was more valuable in assessing female attractiveness rather than male attractiveness. Utility estimates measure how important a specific trait is when it's being manipulated. This metric showed that feminized facial height was more preferred in women than men, and sex-typical facial height is attractive. As this study shows, it is especially attractive in women. In simple terms, it means that there is an ideal facial height and width and dimension and face shape that seems to be more attractive on women, more so than the other facial heights and widths and dimensions that women can have, and I guess the same can also go for men, although that's not what the study is testing. Zoe's absolute or real-life facial height is already quite feminized, and she is close to that ideal that study from Mogielski and Welling did find, and so when she sports a bang hairstyle, it just further feminizes her face according to the study, and it seems to make her seem more attractive, as men often find her to look more homely. And again, femininity does correlate up to a limit of how much men find a particular face attractive, and so when the short-haired Catwoman with more masculine features and more masculine hairstyles comes on screen, it's still attractive, but for a completely different reason and appealing to a completely different type of look. Mogielski's study also talked about eyebrow thickness, and this is another overlooked facial feature. Zoe has exceptionally thick and dark eyebrows, and this is very much so attractive on both men and women, which is why brow lifts and brow pens are a thing to begin with. This contributes to her seductive appearance, and this was confirmed in another study which shows a surprising preference for thicker brows being more attractive in women than in men. This is especially applied to long-term mating contexts, such as if you're looking for a wife versus a one-night stand type of thing. Perhaps the eyebrow thickness contributes to that look, and some research by Windhager et al. Has shown an opposite effect, where thicker eyebrows are perceived as more dominant and masculine. The study by Welling did note how eyebrows are tightly associated with personal qualities like narcissism, but although I think that's a bit of a stretch. Regardless, it is a bit difficult to say if eyebrows are actually what's making women who look like Zoe attractive, those thick, dark eyebrows, or if it's being associated with what's known as personality bias, where we associate those eyebrows with certain personality qualities like leadership or narcissism or dominance, and some men might find that to be attractive rather than the eyebrows themselves. In Zoe's case, it is clear her dark, dense, and thick eyebrows do work to her advantage. They make her look a lot more healthy and youthful, while also striking and approachable at the same time. However, in certain contexts like Catwoman, they can also add perceptions of untrustworthiness, free-spiritedness, and overall a sensual aura, so it's hard to say if having thick eyebrows on your face might give you the same results. One small note to make about Zoe's forehead shape: it is quite large, larger than average in terms of forehead height, but it is also a very feminizing feature and neotenous feature because of its rounded shape, much like how an infant has a rounded forehead. And so while a lot of women opt to hide that forehead shape with bangs or some kind of curtain hairstyle, I think with Zoe's case, as she's gotten older and has much more sharpness to her features, has lost a lot of that baby fat, it works very heavily to her advantage, much like with how Angelina Jolie transformed her look from young and youthful to sharp and striking as she matured. It's very much the same thing, and as she pulls her hair back, the extreme feminizing characteristic of the rounded forehead balances out really well with the masculine angularity in her cheekbones, jawline, and midface. The last feature, and probably the most obvious contributor to Zoe's facial attractiveness, is her jawline. Above her eye area and zygomatic region, her jawline and general morphological jaw structure, so the shape of the jaw itself, stand out as very Western beauty standard model-esque. As we explained from our previous analysis of Ho Yeon-jung from Squid Game, there is a certain jaw shape and facial look that seems to be really popular in the West, and everyone from Kim Kardashian downwards has been trying to emulate it ever since. And if you look at their facial features, you notice that they have very strong jaws compared to Eastern beauty standards, where women much prefer a softer and more feminized rounded shaped jaw. We recently made a video explaining some of the jaw anatomy and the terms that we would use, and one of them was the gonale angle or the jaw angle. Depending on the photo, Zoe's gonale angle or the jaw angle does vary quite a bit, and it is clearly a low angle ranging from say 114 degrees to 125, and her ramus or this part of the jaw is near vertical. By and large, these are very much masculine characteristics. In other words, they're values you would expect to find on a man more than you'd find on a woman. And so that could be part of the reason why Zoe's look stands out so much, and it stands out so well, is because it's an extremely dimorphic face of extreme femininity and extreme masculinity from the jaw. Because the jaw shape and size and values are more commonly found on men, it doesn't necessarily mean that it masculinizes the overall face. It doesn't mean that Zoe looks like a man. Other attractive models and actresses like Angelina Jolie or Kareena Kapoor, we've done analysis on both, also have a similarly low gonale angle. Since the rest of her face is highly feminine and dimorphic, this actually gives her the striking appearance because it robustifies the jaw area. And the robustification of her face is a concept for the podcast, but as we explained in human evolution terms, it just means that her face is more well protected, it gives her a fighting advantage, and she definitely looks like someone that can fight. That's the gist for why she was selected as Catwoman. While you can make any actress learn how to fight, not all of them will look like they can fight, and for this role, you need someone who looks like that. Zoe's face is unique because she has so much femininity elsewhere that she can afford to have a very sharp and masculine, prominent jawline while still looking feminine. This is actually a very common phenomenon that we see among the most attractive women in the modeling scene by Western beauty standards. In fact, the large majority of runway models have sharper and more angular jawlines than the average man. Of course, the jaw angle only takes into account the side view. While it definitely influences the front, there are better frontal assessments of the jawline. And one attractive quality of the jaw is having a prominent jaw tapering effect. This ties back to being facially lean, so you can actually see the feature and have it pop. In a clinical study through the Journal of Craniofacial Surgery done by Saponaro et al., titled The Rules of Attractiveness, a study on the lower facial third, researchers tried to assess which anthropometric value, so a measurement based on your ethnicity or your racial group, of the frontal shape of the lower third is considered attractive. This simply means that they studied what measurements in the frontal view make for an attractive jawline. 202 random examiners were asked to rate a picture as attractive or unattractive. The measurements that were then taken is quite simple, and we like to refer it to as the jaw frontal angle. It is that cross section of lines near the chin and extending to the gonian or the back part of the jaw. On Zoe, her angle is about 90 to 94 degrees depending on the photo, lens distortion and tilting, but her overall jaw shape is quite pleasing with a defined tapering towards a harmonious chin size, meaning that her chin isn't too big, too small, it's not too high, nor is it too low. This angle would be reflective of that pleasing jaw shape, and the study found a similar harmonious range where female examiners found angles between 85 and 92 degrees as most attractive. Mind you, Zoe's degree is within that range. male examiners found an almost identical ideal range, and it was clear that narrow angles near 76 degrees and broad angles near 107 degrees and over were very unattractive. The statistical p-value for this was very low, cluing us into the significance of these findings. What this means is that these results could be replicated and they are of clinical importance. It's not just a matter of a fluke or some kind of subjectivity of attractiveness. There are rules that make a face attractive versus one that isn't attractive, and there are ranges and harmonious guidelines that researchers try to find. What these angles tell us is that a jaw that is neither too flat or wide or too narrow and rounded is the most pleasing to look at from the front. One consideration of this study was that it mostly consisted of models, so even then we're looking at the upper attractiveness of attractive people, and realistically not everyone is going to fall within the desirable range, but that's exactly why we have attractive versus an unattractive face, and most people can tell the difference. If the study was done on, say, the general population, we would likely see more low extreme and high extreme jaw angles, and the attractive range would broaden out a bit more to say like 78 to 100 degrees. In that case, there would be a lot more people that fall within the harmonious range, although if we're comparing by modeling beauty standards, then we should be using the first value of 84 to 92. To close out this video, Zoe Kravitz is really no exception to any of these harmonious ranges, and there are many we can talk about, but for the sake of an already long video, we're going to cut it there. She is exceptional in terms of jaw angularity, leanness, and facial harmony, but also in one aspect that's very unique in terms of facial dimorphism, in that her upper third is very feminized and her lower third is very masculinized, and this is what creates a unique looking, striking face, the type that really stands out from the crowd. As always, if you'd like to get your face assessed, much like we assess Zoe's face in a lot more detail actually, you can order a facial aesthetic report over at the Coos website. Check out our articles on facial aesthetics, visit us on Instagram and TikTok, and you should really ask your questions in the r/Coos Studio subreddit, which is where you can get answers from other people as well.